everyone, welcome to my studio. Last week I did a video in which I used a baby wipe for an underpainting, and it was a lot of fun. It's just a fun technique, and we got some interesting results. And so this week I thought I'm going to try an underpainting technique that I have been wanting to try for a very long time, and I just have never done it. So I thought, why not experiment in front of you all? So I don't know how this is going to go, but I want to do an underpainting using wine. Alright, so pastel, I love pastel because it's so versatile. We can start paintings in so many ways. Wet underpaintings and dry underpaintings, and any kind of media just about we can put underneath pastel. And so I really like the wet underpainting. So we put down a layer of pastel and we wet it somehow. And basically all we're doing is putting pastel back into its liquid form. When it's made into a pastel stick, it is pure pigment, a little bit of binder, and some water formed into a paste. So a liquidy paste formed into a shape, and that's your pastel stick. So when we wet it, we're pretty much getting gouache. And it's just a lot of fun to respond to a wet underpainting. So you can use alcohol, rubbing alcohol, you can use odorless mineral spirits, you certainly can use water, and I have had people say, you know, why not use alcohol, use vodka? And I've tried that, that works great. And I always say, what about wine? Let's try wine. So today we're going to do a white wine underpainting. So let's talk about the subject. I'm going to be painting a little meadow of wildflowers and a nice evergreen tree. I've done a very quick value thumbnail so that I've blocked in my dark shapes, my light shapes, and my middle value shapes. So the first thing I'm going to do before I get started is I'm going to just use a pencil to draw in those big shapes, just looking at my thumbnail. I'm working on a piece of white Pastel Premier, which is sanded paper. It's mounted, so this way I don't have to worry so much about the paper buckling if I get it too wet. And I also don't really know what's going to happen with the wine as an underpainting. Those are the dark shapes. Then I'm going to create a kind of pathway of dark leading through the flowers so that the flowers kind of have something to hang on to. So that's my initial drawing. So now I have to put down a layer of pastel, and I'm going to just use some hard pastel. These are Nupastels. I like to use the harder pastels in the underpainting because then, because they don't have as much pigment, they have more binder, they don't fill the tooth of the paper as quickly as a softer pastel would do. So I'm going to block in those dark tree shapes, and I'm also going to block in this dark pathway through the grass. I'm going to add a little bit of purple to these things because there's going to be a lot of purple in the wildflowers, so I want it to be in the underpainting as well. And let's see. Then I want to block in those distant shapes, so I have trees that are in the distance that are not going to be as dark as the trees as the evergreen tree in the foreground. So I'm using a lighter, cooler, duller green for that. And then I want to block in the lightest value, which is the sky. Now in my reference photo, the sky is overexposed. It looks white. But I know because I was there, it wasn't really white. It was just an overcast kind of day. So it probably had a little color to it. So I'm going to add a pale pink. Actually, there's another pale pink. That's a warmer pink, and this is a little bit of a cooler pink. The next thing I'm going to do is add the most intense colors, which happen to be the flowers. Now, I could go ahead and put in all the flower shapes right now, but they're probably going to get changed around as the painting progresses. I'll just kind of hint at some of that color with some nice rosy pink. And then what are we left with? We're left with the green grass. Now I could paint the green grass, but I think what I'm going to do is put in kind of a dull mauve-y pink, which will act as an interesting color that's going to be underneath the flowers, underneath the flowers and the grass. I could paint it green, but then everything would be just overly green. So I'm picking a color that I know will work well with the green. Alright, so now we have that first layer. We're going to wet it down. Now we could use water, we could use rubbing alcohol, we can use odorless mineral spirits, but I think I'm going to have fun today and use a little wine. Now this is a total experiment. I have not practiced this before, so you are going to be the guinea pigs, I guess, for this. I'm using an old stiff brush, and I'm going to start by wetting down the lightest areas first. Whenever I'm doing a wet underpainting, I like to start with the lighter areas because your liquid tends to get dirty, and this helps keep it clean. This is an interesting, what's happening here? It's wetting, it's getting liquefied just as any other wet underpainting would normally do. So far so good. I'm going and putting in these trees. One thing that I can tell you, when you do a wet underpainting and you have a brush, it doesn't matter what liquid you're using, don't be a house painter. Meaning you want to get in there and paint with the brush and start making brush strokes that help describe what it is you're painting. So here what I'm doing is I'm going in and painting this grassy stuff, right? So I'm painting it with brush strokes that are kind of gestural, that help describe this textures in the grass. Now I don't know if you can see on the camera, and we will get a close-up in just a minute, but I'm getting some really interesting drips and things from this wine that I'm really excited about. I'm not worried about the flower shapes and where they are. You know, we're going to adjust those once we start adding the pastel. Don't worry about that. What I'm just trying for right now is getting some interesting color and texture so I have something to respond to. Now the only thing I have left to do are the trees, and I'm going to go ahead and paint those kind of the way I would paint them with the pastel sticks. So back and forth to kind of create that evergreen feeling. There's another one. There's not another one in my photo, but I added one. I took out my artistic license and I thought, you know what, we need another one. Alright, so there is the underpainting. This is really cool. I am really excited about this because look what's happening. You can get a little bit closer. You see when this is, the alcohol of the wine is evaporating and we're getting some really interesting, I call these spider webs. And you get them a lot with odorless mineral spirits. You don't get them as much with water. So I'm really excited. This is my resulting wine. We're going to have to let this dry. This is in the ugly stage. I know that some of you made comments on the last video. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so ugly. What's going to happen? Hopefully I'm going to pull it out and make it beautiful. So stick with me. But we're going to let this dry for just a few minutes. Alright everyone, I'm back. It took about 4 minutes to dry. I was surprised at how quickly it dried. Usually with water it takes a little bit longer to dry, so the wine was actually seemed a little faster than alcohol. I suppose we should look and see what the alcohol content on the wine bottle is. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I'm really excited about the different drips and kind of textural things that happen, so let's see how we can respond to this. I'm going to be using my set of Terry Ludwig pastels. This is a set that I selected. It's called the Floral Landscape set. It will be out mid-June 2019. So if you've seen this, if you're watching this video after that date, go over to terryludwig.com and you'll be able to find the set there. But these are pastels that I personally selected from his set, his full range. So the first thing I'm going to do is reinforce the dark areas. I'm going to start with a dark blue. Now, one thing that I like to do is layer color by value, meaning if I see a tree and it's dark green, I'm going to make it dark green, but not right away. I want to build up to the dark green by having some interesting colors underneath. So I'm going to start with a dark blue, and I'm going to very lightly go in and put that dark blue in that suggested pathway of dark that I established early on. Then I'm going to add another layer of color before I get to the actual local color. So this is a dark burgundy. And I'm going to lightly layer that on top of the dark blue. And you can still see the underpainting colors, and that's my goal. I don't want to cover up all of the stuff that I worked so hard at putting down underneath. But this is a pastel painting, so we have to add some pastel. So that's 2 layers. Let's go with 3 layers. Why not? So I'm going to add another dark value color, which is, this is a dark purple. And I'm going to use, I like to use this because I have a lot of purple in the flowers themselves, so it'd be nice to have it in these base layers. Now, those trees are dark green, so let's go ahead and put in some of the dark green. So I'm going to go in with a dark cool green. This is a dark blue green, and I'm going back and forth to kind of hit at the feeling of the evergreen. And the one thing that I want to avoid is having it look like this Christmas tree shape here. No, that's not even a good one. I want to make it look more natural. So I'm looking at my photo kind of just to remind me that this tree is not what my brain tells me, but it is what it's a little bit more interesting than that Christmas tree shape that's in my brain. Now there's some of those branches that are sticking out a little bit further, getting some of the light. That's a little bit too light. So I want to go ahead and pull some of those branches out. And right over here as well. And then that's really pretty much all that I'm going to do on the trees. The next thing that I want to do is address the trees that are in the distance. So those are trees that are in the background. So those are going to be lighter, cooler, duller. So I chose a grayed down blue. And I'm just going to make some kind of little gestural marks. I don't want a lot of detail, just to say, hey, there's some trees back there. And if you look really closely, you can see I haven't covered up that green that was in that wine underpainting. The next thing I'm going to do is put in the sky. The sky sets the mood and the tone and the feeling for the painting. I like the underpainting color, so I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce that pink color that was in the underpainting. And I'm going to use it to start to carve into the tree, so the tree has a more interesting shape. But then I'm going to add another lighter, softer pink from the Terry Ludwig set, just to give a little bit of a brightness to it. And then where it comes down to the horizon, where it hits the trees, I'm going to warm it up a little bit, and I'm adding a very, very pale yellow. Warm yellow. I'm carving away at these little tree shapes. Now normally if I'm going to carve in with a very light color into dark, I keep a towel handy, paper towel or a dish towel or something like that, so when you work into the light areas, you wipe off your pastel so that you can keep your sky clean. Alright, so I'm done with the sky. Now I'm going to move on to the grassy areas and then to the flowers. And you might be wondering, well, what's taking so long to get to the flowers? Isn't that what this painting is all about? It's all about the flowers, but yet I'm working on them last. And the reason why is because they are the decorations. I have to build the painting up before I can put those final details. So I'm going to reinforce this mauve-y dirt color. I call this dirt because it's just a different color than the green grass. And it's going to help make the green grass a little bit more interesting. So I'm going over with some of those mauves and purples. Purple is also a really nice color to use when you have a lot of greens. Now, what's happening is I'm starting to cover up all those wonderful drips, and I have to stop myself and remind myself that, hey, you ended up with some really cool drips, so be careful that you don't cover it all up. So I'm going to use a lighter touch so that some of that can still peek through. All right. Now, before I go much further with the green, I do have to start to put in those flower shapes. If I wait too long, I'm going to fill the tooth of the paper, and then it'll be too hard to put them in. So I'm starting with a darker color, the darkest color that I see in those flowers. And I am not actually sure what they are, but they're just really cool purple. That's a clover. I'm not sure what the other ones are, but they're just interesting shapes and color. Now the clovers are pinker, so I'm going to go ahead and put in some pink blobs to represent those clovers. So there's a start to the flowers. Now they're in place, I can start to go ahead and add the green. So in the very distant areas of this meadow, I'm going to use a lighter, cooler, duller green so that it looks like it's in the distance. As I come forward into the painting, I can gradually get it brighter, more intense, warmer, but I'm starting with the duller, grayed down, more neutral greens in the distance. And then I'm coming forward, I want to kind of reinforce that dark area with a darker green. And it's going to start to get brighter. And notice right now I'm using all wide strokes with the side of my pastel, completely wide, flat strokes. I don't have any grass marks. I don't have any texture. I'm just getting it all nice and big fat marks. And then I'll gradually carve into the detail. All right, now I'm to the point where I'm going to start adding the detail. So I'm going to give everything in the foreground a quick spray with workable fixative, and I'm using Blair very low odor workable fixative. Notice what happened. It made everything dark, and it kind of took away the brilliancy of the color. But it also has revealed some of these strips, which kind of look like stems, so that's kind of cool. But I'm doing this so that now when I come back over with my greens and my flowers, I'll get a little bit of a better feeling of texture. Gotta wait for it to dry. But there you go, you can kind of see the dark that's underneath is preserved, and then the little specks of green kind of stay in place, and it kind of looks a little bit like a texture in those grassy areas. So now you can see that I've pretty much covered up my flowers, so I've got to pull them back out. Now this is the tricky part, because I'm going to pull them out, but yet I don't want them to look like they're stuck on top of the painting. So I'm going to actually paint some. I'm adding another shade of purple. I'm going to paint some.
Battery.
It's dead?
Yeah. Go.
Alright, so I'm just kind of reinforcing some of the purples in these flowers. So I'm adding another layer of purple. And the one thing that I have to be careful of is that I don't have them all looking like they're pasted on top of the grass. So I'm going to actually put some in, and then I'll end up burying some of them in the grass. I'm also trying to arrange them in a pleasing arrangement so that they lead your eye through the painting. I'm going to take a hard pastel and just kind of start to put in a few of those smaller ones that are in the distance. So I'm just making tiny little marks to create some of the smaller flowers that are in the distance, and then these bigger purple ones, and then this one big clover is more up front and center. This guy's pretty close too. I think I need another one right in here. Again, they're still sitting on top of the paper. We are going to have to bury them a little bit, which we're going to get to. I'm going to add some brighter pinks to the clover so that they don't look like the same color as those purple things, whatever those are. I'll have to look those up. Alright, now I have enough of them in that I think that I'm going to add a little bit of character to these fun purple guys. So I'm adding a lighter red violet to the tips of them. And now I'm going to come back with the green and start to add some of the foliage and some of the green stuff. Oh, we need one other little guy right over in here. I just feel like it's just too empty over here. So there we go. So let's go back and reinforce the green stuff. Again, big strokes. No, I'm not painting the grass yet. I'm going to start to bury some of these flowers with the grass colors. I can use some warmer greens down in here. Warmer greens have more yellow in them. I'm going to pull some of that light down in there. I think I'm going to add a little bit more of the light to the tree. The tree's kind of a little too dark back there. Alright. Now let's start to add some chunkier marks of green. So we're going to start to add some of feeling of some of the leaf shapes and some of the brighter or thinner green grassy marks. So I'm using my pastel to create a variety of marks, some thicker. And right now I also don't have any stems on any of my flowers. So I think I can go ahead and put in some of the stems. Add a little bit more green to that area right there. I'm not worried about finishing the painting all the way to the edges, but I do need a little bit more green in here. Alright, so let's take a harder pastel and come in and create some of those stems. Now the one thing that I want to make sure is that I don't end up with balloons, you know, so balloons on sticks or string. So I'm using broken lines to create those stems for these flowers. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to use these harder pastels to have a variety of marks in my grasses. And also one thing that I really liked about this scene was how some of the grasses kind of came back up over the distant trees. So it really pushed them into the distance and made you feel as though you were right down in these grassy areas. So I'm trying to create the depth in the grasses by starting with the big strokes and then kind of gradually coming down to these tinier, more gestural grass type marks. And I like to use the harder pastels to do this. I can get a nice fine broken line. Kind of let that pastel dance. I like how this really light one kind of came up across the page like that. So then the final thing that I'm going to do is just start to add a little bit more detail and refinement to some of the flower shapes. Add a little bit more light. Some of these, the purple flowers have a little bit of texture to them, so I'm going to go ahead and add that right now. That guy got buried really well. I'm going to pull him back out just a little bit more. I'm also going to add a little bit of violet to the sky. Remember the sky was very pink? I want to connect the sky to the ground, so I'm adding a little bit of purple. That might be a little too dark. Just tested it out. It's a little too dark, so I want to kind of take that away. And what else? I like that color though. You know what I like about this scene? There's little tiny white flowers in there. The white might be too bright, so if I put a little periwinkle blue, that might be a nice touch. And maybe just a few lighter ones. This is a pale purple. And I'm going to just kind of put them throughout the painting. This is normally when I'm painting by myself and not doing a video, is when I step back and I try to evaluate what I have and try to see if I need more, or sometimes I need less. Sometimes I need to take things away. So always when you're painting, make sure you make time to step back and evaluate. Otherwise, you might have some really good things going on that you end up overworking because you haven't stepped away long enough from your painting to evaluate what you've done. So this will be a good time for me to stop. I'm going to add just a little hint of brighter pink on some of these flowers, just because. But this is a good time for me to stop. I think the wine underpainting was pretty successful. It gave me something really fun to respond to, and I think I will definitely give it another try, maybe next time with a little red wine. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Be sure to comment, to like it, to subscribe to my channel, and if you like this video, I do many more videos on my Patreon page. So I've just got finished filming 2 videos for Patreon, so head on over to the Patreon page. The link is in the description, and there's a lot more of video and lessons and pastel painting and a lot of fun. So I hope you'll join me both here and over on Patreon. So thanks for tuning in.